can see our concrete highway running yonder in the sun. And I see your face there shining where the kids play in the streets. And a billion jillion windows that are New York town to me. Ride my subway.
Okay, that was Mike and Ruthie, who played at the New Revival Coffee House back in March of 2019. So I'm Jeff Brown. Welcome to Saturday Morning Breakfast. And Saturday Morning Breakfast is a program of First Parish Church of Stowe and Acton. And if you're a guest today, and if you'd like to find out more about our church, our website is fpc-stowe-acton.org. So now I'd like to welcome Lauren Bell from the Assabet Co-op Market. Lauren, you there?
I am.
Great. So why the name change, and what have you been doing?
Well, first, thanks for having me back. I think our last event was actually our last event before we stopped doing in-person events. So I remember it well. And yeah, we've come quite a ways. And just as a heads up, when I finish, after we do a quick Q&A, if there's a little bit of time for that, I've got two little kids screaming upstairs, so I do need to. I wish I could stay for the Humpback whale presentation because it sounds awesome, but I can't. But in any case, thanks for having me back. For those of you who don't know, I'm Lauren Bell from the Assabet Co-op Market. That is our new name, and we had been the Assabet Village Co-op Market. And to answer your question, Jeff, it's a shorter name. It's easier to digest, and it is more accurate reflection of the entire Assabet Valley region that we're serving with our grocery store. So I want to share some. For those of you who are already owners in the co-op, you've heard about our site announcement, so hopefully you're already very excited about that. Our public site announcement is coming 1 week from today. So for those of you who don't know, and I'm going to talk about that in a second, for those of you who don't know, we are opening a full-service cooperative grocery store in Maynard. So this is like any other grocery store you've ever been to in many ways. So every department, from meat to eggs to dairy, deli and cafe, bulk foods, all of that. The two big differences are, number one, that we source from dozens and dozens of local farms and local food producers, bakeries, sauce makers, drink makers, all that. And that keeps profits local, helps build a thriving local economy. And the other big difference, of course, it reduces our carbon footprint for our food too. And the other big difference is that we are owned by you, our shoppers, instead of some far off corporation. And that keeps both control and profits local. You don't need to be an owner to shop at the co-op. You guys have heard this spiel before, but you don't need to be an owner to shop at the co-op. So whether you join or not as an owner, please come shop and feel good when we open, because you're supporting the local economy and local farms and local food producers. But our owners, I don't know where we were at last time when I spoke with you guys last February, but we are now at 1,367 owners from 40 communities around central Massachusetts. And each of these owners has paid a one-time $200 share. There's no annual fee. You can pay it in $25 bits, and they get benefits for it, from sharing our profits in profitable years to having a say in what farms and products and programs we offer, classes we offer. So if you want your favorite Stowe farm in the store, or you want a kid's cooking class or mushroom foraging, you own us, you tell us, we try to provide it. You also get bulk ordering discounts and voting rights, of course. This is a democratically run business. And we have been at this for a number of years, and we finally have our location in Maynard. As I mentioned, if you are an owner, you have already received word of what that location is. The public announcement is coming 1 week from today. And this will be an 8,000 square foot full service grocery store in Maynard. And I don't know if I have the privileges to do this, Jeff, you can tell me, but I have a screen share that I can share with folks of the rendering.
Yeah, if Katie can make Lauren a co-host for a second.
I see it there. Yep. Okay. So let me share this with you if I can. Here it is. So this is our initial store rendering. Like I said, I cannot yet share the precise location in Maynard, but it's a pretty exciting spot. And this is the initial sketch. This is basically the footprint of the building and the parking lot. So we will have an L-shaped parking lot with parking for 35 cars, an 8,000 square foot grocery store with about 6,000 square feet of retail. The only difference here in terms of, I mean, there will be some slight differences when the official architectural renderings come in, but the biggest difference that you'll notice in the next rendering is that those two dormers on the front will be gone, because what we realize is those are prime space for solar. So those two dormers will be gone so that we can put solar panels up there. But yeah, it's pretty exciting to actually see something tangible coming about. And again, that's a week from today. But it's an exciting time to become an owner. And we got a lot of excited owners who have been waiting a while for this to come about. Just so you know, right now, last Saturday, we launched the capital campaign. This is a $2 million capital campaign, essentially to match bank funding and put doors on the store, as they say. And it's an owner loan-driven capital campaign. So you do not need to be an investor in the capital campaign to be an owner. About 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 owners can and will invest. And we are psyched to say that we had done a little bit of silent outreach, but just 1 week into our capital campaign, we are almost at $600,000 toward our $2 million goal. And these are interest-paying owner loans, and our owners are really stepping up to make this a reality. And it's pretty exciting. I can share this. I'll show you the kind of, let's see if I can share this other piece. Yeah. So let's see, did it go?
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. We saw the carrot.
Oh, good. Okay, good. Yep. So yeah, we are on our way, and it's a pretty exciting time to be part of the co-op. And you know, I just wanted to share something with you that I've been thinking of, and some of our owners have been chiming in about. We don't know what this winter is going to bring, right? On so many fronts, and a lot of uncertainty out there, and our community is a big support for that. The co-op community and obviously the church community and all of that. But as the days get darker and the cold sets in, and uncertainty around the election and uncertainty around COVID and all that, a lot of our owners are chiming in to say thank you, that this is a very bright light at the end of the tunnel. And I hope that our owners can see this for what it is. As we wrap up our capital campaign, which will end at the end of October, this winter we build. And so as you're driving through Maynard, you will see local tradespeople out there, supported by the community funds, by the capital campaign, and a GM hired. And you'll see our store literally coming together brick by brick, panel by panel, door by door, window by window. You'll see the staff being hired and trained. You'll see the equipment moving in during the springtime and early summer. And then my vision, my hope here, and I am very hopeful about this, is that come next summer, sometime late July or so, or early August, everyone is vaccinated and feeling quite a bit safer. And it's a bright sunny morning on an August morning, and politicians and farmers and all of our owners, hundreds of owners, are gathered outside of our store that you see there with a big red ribbon and a big pair of scissors, and we do the countdown. And we cut that big red ribbon, and we all line up for a grocery cart, and we go in, and we're going up and down the aisles, smiling and talking about how wonderful this is, and basically community again. So that's obviously much more than just a grocery store, and this is ours. We will, and that's the other piece. We're not leasing this property. We are purchasing it, so we will own this property indefinitely. So it's a really exciting time.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. That's about all the time we have. Maybe you could, in the chat box, write down your contact information if anybody has any questions.
Sure, I'll put the website as well, and then you guys can go there. You can always become an owner online, and you can always email me with questions. So thank you, Neil and Ingrid and Jeff again, and everybody for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming and good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're ready for our feature presentation with Katie and Dave. So during the presentation, if you have questions, please write them in the chat box and I will ask the questions. At the end of the presentation, we'll open up everybody's remarks.
That sounds great. Thank you, Jeff. Jeff, if you could also watch, when people joined, they were not automatically muted. And so if we get any new participants,
Okay.
if you could just check the list and mute people as they come in, that would be great.
Yep.
Only because if they're like us, they're like talking while they're turning on their systems.
Gotcha.
So, hi, I'm Katie, and this is Dave. And we're both wearing the same T-shirts because we were both leaders in a whale count last year, and they gave us these free T-shirts for them. So, yay! We are here to give you a talk on humpback whales, and what I'm going to do is share the screen and get started with that. We volunteer at the NOAA's Hawaiian Islands Humpback Whale National Marine Sanctuary. Boy, that's a big mouthful, and I always mess it up when I say it. But our employer is actually NOAA, which is the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. So your U.S. government is paying for us,
But they're not paying us.
to be volunteers to work with humpback whales and the National Marine Sanctuary. So I'm going to start sharing the screen, and let me know, Jeff, if that's pretty good, if you guys can see that.
Yep, that looks good.
Great. Okay. So, humpback whales. These whales are all over the world, as you will see. However, they got their name back in the 1700s when the whalers were out doing their thing, and their name and we'll see this a little bit later, means the winged whale of New England. But actually, they didn't know this, but they're worldwide. So we've seen them in Hawaii, and that's not two whales that you're seeing on the screen. We'll promise you'll see whales later on. So let's see, going down.
So the best way to see humpback whales is with friends. Here we have some friends from Vermont and Faroe Island, and they happen to be visiting us out in Maui, which is one of the Hawaiian islands that's really well situated for whale watches. And unlike whale watches in New England, these are not roller coaster seasick. You're out in some fairly flat water, and your chances of seeing whales are excellent.
And in fact, this is a picture of whales that we took when we were out, and that whale is doing a tail slap in the water. We'll get to that later. But that's Maui, and what you're seeing is the coast of the Maui Bay, and our place is way off to the right. You can't see it. But that behind that is the slopes of Haleakala, which means in Hawaiian, the house of the sun. That's their big volcano on Maui.
So when we were out with our friends, as I say, the whale watching experience is generally pretty good. This year, we got what they call mugged by a young whale. That's when the whale comes up to the boat, and once they're within a few yards, the captain is obliged to cut the engines. So as long as that whale hangs out with you, you're there, drifting in the wind. And the young whales are particularly curious. And this youngster came up to us and hung out with us for a good 20 minutes, going back and forth under the boat and showing us his white pectoral fins. That's what you're seeing there. They turn dark as the whale gets older.
So we're going to show you just a minute or two of this. All right. So we just wanted to show you this slide because this is the logo for the National Marine Sanctuaries. And there are 13 of these sanctuaries all around the United States, including off of Massachusetts. The one off of Massachusetts is called Stellwagen Bank. And you can actually see humpback whales as they migrate back and forth from Canada down to the Caribbean.
So the whale, the humpback whale in Hawaiian is called the kohola. The accent over the A is the emphasized syllable, so it's kohola. And here's the explanation for their Latin name, Megaptera novangliae, or big wind of New England. And this is not one of our boats. These are all coming from the National Marine Sanctuary. Katie, you take over, and maybe I'll log in from my computer.
Okay, so what I'm showing you right here is pictures of whales as they are migrating back and forth from their feeding grounds to their birthing and mating grounds. And what it's showing you is it's got pictures of Hawaii and Alaska right in the middle because that's where we're focusing. But if you look to the right, you see two light aqua blue whales. That's the New England whales that you'll see off of Stellwagen Bank. But you can see they're all over the world. They go from Antarctica to Australia and Africa and South America, and then they come from the Arctic down to the Pacific, and then also down to the Atlantic. And whoops, let me just do this. This is one of my favorite pictures because it shows you that most of the whales that are in the Pacific come down to Hawaii. We get 12,000 a year coming down to Hawaii, and that's why that's such a big, thick orange line. And then also some come down to California and the Baja. And every once in a while, they'll crossbreed or they'll cross over and join somebody else's territory. We don't know why that happens, but it's very interesting and it figures into the whale song, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. Okay. All right. So what you're looking at right now is the Hawaiian Islands Marine Sanctuary. And if you take a look sort of in the middle of your picture, you'll see Maui. And Maui is actually where the largest portion of the sanctuary is. It's everything that's outlined in orange. And the sanctuary was determined a long time ago strictly by the depth. And the depth is 100 fathoms, which is 600 feet. Each fathom is 6 feet. And so it's very shallow around Maui. And there's actually a good reason for that. Maui and Molokai and Lanai all used to be one big volcano, and the volcano collapsed in the middle, and so that's why that whole area is very shallow. And in fact, in Hawaiian, they call that whole area Maui Nui, which means Greater Maui. Whales and humans are both mammals, and they share lots of characteristics. They breathe air, they're warm-blooded, they give live birth. The moms produce milk, and it's very interesting how the babies get their milk. And then they also have hair, and you're going, whales have hair? These whales have hair, and we'll show you that a little bit later on. They're pretty big. They're 35 to 45 feet. They live about as long as we do, and they weigh about 30 to 45 tons. Their pectoral fins are 15 feet long, and their flukes are about 15 feet wide. So they're kind of ginormous. I mean, 15 feet is about 3 times my length, and that's just their pectoral fins. So that's pretty impressive. Then I want to get into the anatomy a little bit, and you've seen blows. Whale blows are like the most common sight that people will see, and that's because they have to breathe about every 7 to 15 minutes. Well, 5 to 10 minutes for the babies, and then 15 to 20 minutes for the adults. And they actually have noses just the way we do. They have 2 nostrils at their top. They call them nares. And you can see that's what's going on with the whale. What they are blowing out is not water that's inside their body, really. What happens is their nares, their nostrils, kind of are cup-shaped. And when they go under the water, they will, those nares will fill up with a little bit of water. And so when they surface, they have to blow out the nares in order to be able to breathe. So there's not much, there's only about a cup of water in there. So what you're seeing is the spray it's at a speed of about 300 miles per hour. I'm not kidding, 300 miles per hour. And that's that huge spray. And that creates aerosols, which, gee, any of us who have been studying COVID will understand very well. The other thing that they have is they have hair. And you see what they have, these tubercles, those are the protuberances on the jaws of this whale. That's hair. We still don't know what it is, what its purpose is. Maybe it's a sensing instrument, we're not sure. But a whale might have like 40 tubercles on it. It's not very much, but you know, that's more than some of us have. Also, let's see, we just went through the pectoral fins. Those are on their sides. I'm not going to get into that anymore. But one of the other interesting that they have is in their mouths, when they open their jaw, they can take in about 5,000 gallons of water. And that's because they have these ventral pleats that go all the way down from their jaw down to like their belly button. And it just opens out hugely. And so that they can take in a whole lot of water, which hopefully has fish in it. Their eyes are about the size of a grapefruit. And they can see okay underwater. It's not great, but it's better than some. And they have very small ears. The picture that you are seeing doesn't even really show the ears. It's only a 1/2-inch slit, and it's located behind the eye. So they also have their tails are called flukes. And the flukes are connected to the rest of the whale by something called the caudal peduncle. And that's the strongest muscle in the animal kingdom. If you are near a whale, you do not want to get hit by the caudal peduncle. So the other thing that's really cool about them is that the flukes are really a fingerprint. That's how we identify the whales. For example, in New England, there is a whale whose name is Salt, and they've been following her for 30 years, and they know her children, and they know her grandchildren, and they identify them all via the flukes.
Humpback whale, the males sing these very complex songs. And the interesting thing is they all share a common song within a given population segment. They develop slight changes over the year, and then it changes yearly. So it accumulates changes, and it's completely different song 5 to 8 years. So over what range they can hear each other, but they do seem to be able to learn from each other. And when they frequently hang straight down in the water like that. I'm going to turn it back to you because I can't tell if I'm being heard or not.
I cut out just a little bit with Dave for some reason.
Okay, but you've been hearing me fine, right, Jeff?
Yep, that's correct.
Okie dokie. All right. So yeah. So other things that happen with the whales is they do their surface activities, which is really almost all that we see. We only see like 5% of their underwater activity, just because we're in a sanctuary. And when you're in a sanctuary, there's a lot of stuff you're not allowed to do, like go within 100 yards unless you have a permit. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about their surface activity. So one is the tail slap, and that is, remember I said that that's where they use their caudal peduncle to do these slaps. You do not want to get anywhere near the whale when they're doing those. The head lunge is kind of interesting. They mostly seem to be doing this as a competitive activity. The females don't do them that often. The males usually do. And what the males will sometimes do is a whale will be coming along, and a competitive male will be coming along maybe to its side. It will jump up a little bit, come down on that first whale, and scrape along its head. And that's really very painful, because most whales have huge barnacles on their chins. And so you can imagine it would be pretty painful to be hit by one of those. A spy hop, we just think that that's when they're jumping up a little bit to be able to take a look around. So they only go up high enough so that their eyes their eyes are surfacing. Breaching is the activity that everybody loves to see. Everybody loves to see. We think it's maybe play behavior. We also think that it may be grooming behavior, in that there are things that will attach themselves to whales, and it's not just barnacles, it's other things. And every once in a while, if they do a really good job of breaching and coming down, they'll kind of slough off whatever it is that's hanging on to them. So this is what we think is really fascinating, mothers and calves. So feel free to read what's on there. I'm going to tell you what happens with moms is they'll get pregnant one year down in Maui, because that's where, or wherever their warm spot is, because that's where the mating happens. And then they'll swim back up to Alaska, and they'll eat and eat and eat and eat, and they'll get up to like 45 tons. And then they will swim down to Hawaii the next year and have the baby, keep the baby in Hawaii for about a month or so, and then swim back up to Alaska with the baby. Now, the really fascinating thing about this is there is nothing for them to eat in Hawaii. Zero. The fishes are really right next to the reef, which is too shallow for them. There's nothing out in the ocean for them. The mama will lose about a third of her weight when she is birthing the baby, taking care of it, and taking it back to Alaska. So she will go down from 45 tons to 30 tons. It's just incredible. And part of what she's doing is that weight loss is not just the baby, but she feeds the baby every day, and she feeds the baby about 120 pounds of milk. The milk is 30 to 50% body fat. And what happens is the mom will be sitting there in the water. The baby will come up and nudge the mom on the mom's tit, and then the mom will exude some of her milk, and the baby will grab the milk in the water. The baby does not attach itself to the mom. It grabs the food from the water as it comes out of the mom. So it's just interesting how they've been able to adapt to the aquatic environment by doing that. Okay, so this is a video of a mom and her calf, and what do you call the attendant whales? The escort. The escort. The escort is usually a male. That is, and usually the reason that the escort is with the mom and the baby is because the escort is saying, okay, when you're done with that baby, you're mine, I like you. And we don't know whether that really happens, but we're pretty sure that that's what they're there for.
Right. That's the escort behind it. Mama's on the surface with baby, and then you got the escort behind it. Mom was always about an arm's length away. But her arm is like 15 feet long. And inside that pec fin, they have the same bone structure as a hand. Wow. They have like digits.
Woohoo!
There's the escort going down. That's Mom right next to the baby.
All right. So here's a picture of a mom with a baby on top, and the baby is just kind of swimming along in the mom's wake. We think that the babies are sort of, you know how when you've got a bicyclist and you're what's the term when you're following somebody in the wind? Drafting. We think the baby is drafting the mom. And also, one of the other interesting things about babies is that they don't really know how to breathe that well. And so what happens is when they're born, the mama will get underneath the baby and lift the baby up to the surface so that the baby can breathe. And the mom will actually do this for a little bit after the baby's born until the baby's figured out how to breathe on their own. So it's another really wild and crazy thing about their adaptivity. The baby usually doesn't stay with the mom much longer than about a year. That's about as long as it takes for them to get back up to Alaska and then start feeding. By the way, the trip down from Alaska will take anywhere between a month and 2 months. It's a long time to travel because they don't actually go all that fast. And it's 2,500 miles from Alaska down to Hawaii. So you can imagine making that trip yourself, that you know, at about 5 or 10 miles an hour. That's going to take you a long time. When they're up in Alaska, one of the things that they do to get the maximum amount of food that they can is that they will create these things called bubble rings. And it looks just like they're blowing bubbles, which they are. What they're actually doing, and here's some sound that'll...
They make water. It's the sound of them blowing bubbles. So far.
So that was not whale song. That was the sound of them actually exuding the bubbles. Just so that you know, there is a difference between the whale song and what they're doing here when they're creating the bubble walls. So you can see that circle, and what happens is they create that bubble circle, and then it will trap fish inside of it. And the whales, you know, one or two or more whales will make that circle, and then the whales will come up through the middle and grab as much of those fish as they can. We've seen, there was a picture that they were showing, we saw a couple days ago, where there were like 10 or 15 whales that came up all of a sudden behind these guys that were fishing in Alaska. And it was just kind of amazing that they all surfaced at once to grab their food. When they eat, they can disconnect their jaw. And I'm not sure if it's really clear from the bottom picture, but on the very right is the upper part of the jaw, the upper jaw. And then way off to the left is the end of the lower jaw. And if you can imagine, not only is that huge amount of space there, but then also with those ventral pleats expanding, again, that's about 5,000 gallons. 5,000 gallons is about a third of a swimming pool, an average swimming pool, something like that. So
with more fish.
So yeah. So here's a picture of the whale with the fish inside it. And on the right, you see those strips. Those are that's the baleen. And what happens with the whale is they will they'll take all of the fish into them in. They will close their mouths. They will push out the water, but the fish stay inside. So the baleen are actually there to filter the water back out so that the whale's not always swallowing all that much water. And then what's just left is the fish. The other thing that actually we don't have a picture of, but it's really kind of weird, is that the throat on a whale is only about the size of a grapefruit. So they can't actually eat big fish at all, which is why you hear about, at least the humpback whales, only eating krill, small shrimp, plankton, stuff like that. Little sardines, nothing big. So again,
So if a big fish gets in there, what do they do with it in there?
what they do is they don't end up swallowing it. They end up spitting it out after they get everything else there.
They also have an extremely strong tongue. So what they're doing in any event is they're squishing all this fish into a fish ball the size of a grapefruit. And so the tongue is strong enough they probably can squish something slightly larger.
Oh, that's interesting. Good. Yeah, good point. Okay. The most interesting things that our folks do is we have a disentanglement program, which is really fantastic. And over the past 10 years, I think they've disentangled something like 200 whales. They do an amazing job, and we're going to show you a 5-minute video of this disentanglement program. But I want to point out a couple things. The guy that heads up the program is a guy named Ed Lyman. Wonderful guy, really nice guy. David and I were talking to him one day this year, and it turns out that he actually did a lot of work on the East Coast, and he worked on Star Island. Actually not Star Island, but he worked on the island that's right next door called Appledore, because there's a marine lab there. So we were trading lots of information and stuff like that. It was so cool that here's this guy all the way in Hawaii, and yet we know him because of a couple of these islands in the Atlantic. So we're going to give you guys the video right now. Oops, not by doing this. Maybe I'm sorry, I had that wrong. Maybe it's in a couple of seconds, just so that you can see what's going on with the disentanglement program. But I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Let's go.
There he goes again. He's gonna try again.
No, he's just barely below the surface, guys. He's coming up.
Freeing a 45-foot, 40-ton humpback whale entangled in gear is no easy task. These animals are so large and powerful that they often rip the gear right off the ocean floor and swim off with it, in some cases thousands of miles. For those animals that are relocated, the act of disentangling a large whale is dangerous for the whale and the rescuers alike. The Hawaiian Islands Humpback Whale National Marine Sanctuary's rescue team is one of the few disentanglement response teams that is authorized by NOAA Fisheries to free large whales from life-threatening entanglements. The Sanctuary's team partners with other agencies like NOAA Fisheries, Hawaii's Department of Land and Natural Resources, and the United States Coast Guard. So how do we cut a 40-ton free-swimming whale free of gear? First, we do not get in the water. Instead, we work from boats using a modification of an old whaling technique called kegging. Historically, kegging involved attaching barrels or kegs to the whales by harpooning them. The extra drag and buoyancy of the barrels would slow the whale down, keep it at the surface where it could eventually be approached. Today, for disentanglement purposes, we use grapples, like the one you see here being thrown, to attach to the gear that is entangling the animal. Once attached, we get a Nantucket sleigh ride, just like the whalers used to get in their wooden skiffs. However, instead of skiffs, we use inflatable boats. And instead of wooden barrels, we attach large plastic buoys, as seen here, as our kegging buoys to provide drag and buoyancy. Over time, the animal will remain at or near the surface where we can haul ourselves closer. At this point, we can assess the entanglement to determine how best to cut the animal free. This whale has multiple wraps of line around its tail, with buoys and several hundred feet of line trailing. The trailing line provides drag, causing the wraps to cut deeply into the animal. The rescuers use a specially designed hooked knife on the end of a pole to reach forward to cut the whale free. Here we have some helmet cam footage showing one rescuer keeping the rescue inflatable in position right behind the animal. The other rescuer has a 20-foot pole with a hooked knife on the end. The knife is dull on the outside and sharp on the inside, surface to help protect the animal. The rescuer reaches forward to carefully cut the wraps, which over time have embedded themselves deeply into the whale's tail. 3 cuts are made, at which time the remaining wrap is shed and the whale is entirely free of all gear. This animal has been saved from what was once a life-threatening entanglement. We realize we can't save every whale entangled in gear. However, we can gain information from our efforts as to reduce the threat in the future. Over the past several years, the Sanctuary and Network members have freed more than 20 large whales in Hawaii from life-threatening entanglements, removing over 10,000 feet of line. Some animals, like the calf shown here, were entangled in marine debris. Other animals were entangled in fishing gear. This animal entangled through the mouth was carrying hundreds of feet of line and a large buoy. Once cut free, we found that the gear had been set off the Pribilof Islands in the center of the Bering Sea. This is a straight line distance of over 2,500 nautical miles from the Hawaiian Islands. Over 250 trained responders across multiple islands work together to respond to entangled whales. Many members of the ocean community assist with the effort by reporting, assessing, documenting, and standing by until an authorized team arrives. While we will continue to free large whales from life-threatening entanglements, our ultimate goal is to prevent or at least reduce the threat of entanglement for these animals into the future.
I can just briefly tell you that I was mistaken. It wasn't 200 whales that they've rescued. It is 20, but it's a huge effort whenever they do it. It takes quite a bit to do it. Let's see. There's not basically. Ed was also saying that they have to make sure that they're doing it in a way as safe as possible for both the animal and the human rescuers. So that's why they stay in the boats. They have that lovely grappling hook. This grappling hook was actually they made it themselves, and it looks I think you saw a piece of one of I think you saw one of them. It's basically a hook, and then it's got this other little hook that stops right about here, hanging off of it. And it's really sharp on the inside, but not on the outside, so that they can just pull it, use it to grab the whale and pull, and or not the whale, but the rope that's on the whale and pull and cut the rope off.
Yeah, Bill had a question. Are the rescuers paid or are they volunteers?
There are some about 2 or 3 of the folks are paid, and the rest are volunteers. Yeah, Ed Lyman is actually an employee of NOAA, and he is paid, and he's got 1 or 2 support staff who are paid.
Yeah, great. So do you want to open up all the mics for
Yeah.
questions?
Yeah, folks, if you want to unmute yourselves, you can do that, and feel free to ask me any questions.
So what was the, you may have said this, but what is the season for the whales to be in the Hawaii area?
That's an excellent question. So their feeding happens in the summertime, and they go up to Alaska, where traditionally there's been a lot of plankton and krill and other small fish for them to eat. I will tell you that we're very concerned these days because it seems as if there's fewer whales coming down to Maui, and people have noticed that some whales are relatively thin for whales, and we're concerned about the amount of food that they may have up in Alaska for them to feed. They come down to Maui starting in about November, middle of November, and they stay through the middle of April. But one of the things that you might not be well understood by people is come for a full 6 months. What happens is they'll trickle down. They don't all come in one big pack. They'll trickle down, 15 or maybe 20 or maybe even 3 or 4 at a time. And they'll stay for about 6 weeks, and then they'll go back up to Alaska because there's nothing for them to eat. So, at some point they're hungry and they need to go back where there's food. The mamas will stay a little bit, will only stay about that 6-week period. They'll stay long enough to have the baby, which takes about a week or so. And so every once in a while, the mama has the baby along the way, but usually they'll have the baby in Hawaii. They'll stay for about a month in Hawaii, and then they'll take the baby up with them. The male whales sometimes stay longer because they're trying to find as many females as possible to have fun with. So the males have a slightly different story.
So a couple of questions from Bill. I've heard a lot of concern recently about how noisy the oceans are. Is this a factor in their health?
When you say noisy, Bill, are you thinking about sonar?
Well, yeah, I've heard of interference from ships and so forth, so the whales can't communicate with each other.
Right. It's usually more of a problem with sonar because between Alaska and Hawaii, sure, there are definitely some ships out there, but it's not too huge a problem. The whales do, when they sing, I've been told that they can hear each other from over 1,000 miles away. So their ability to hear the subsurface is way different from our ability to hear. But one of the things that does screw them up is sonar. And so that's why in the marine sanctuary, there's nobody's allowed to use sonar.
Okay, and Peter Fisk asks, why are they called humpback?
Oh, it's because what happens, did you notice in the early on when we were showing a picture of the whale, this was the one that Dave and I took, this is very early on, just as it was diving, its body makes a very strong curve. It's got a very bendable back. And more than other whales, the other whales, when they dive, they'll dive like this, but the humpback whale will dive like this. And that's the hump on the back.
Okay, and Sharon would like to tell us a short story. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll make it very quick. I've told Dave and Katie this story before, but when I was in Alaska one time, I was out on a little excursion boat of about 15 people, and we saw bubble net feeding. We saw about 10 or 12 humpbacks doing the circling, and the bubble net feeding came up and took all these herring into their mouths. And then they dove under the water and started swimming towards our little pontoon boat. So everybody on the boat, we were all snapping photos, and then we realized that they really weren't coming towards our boat. So they actually dove underneath our boat and came up on the other side. And we were, a little nervous, thinking that if any one of them came up, our boat would be tipped over and we'd all be in the water. But they didn't do it. They just played with us and came up on the other side. But it was quite a wonderful experience. Thank you.
I think Sharon is telling you some really great information, and one of the pieces of information that she's telling you is whales really are quite aware of where we are. We have a friend in California who was paddleboarding, and a whale came up right next to her and did not hit her. And she had some great footage of the whale, so it was really great when she shared that with us. And then we heard another story of a woman who was sitting in her kayak, and a whale came up, kind of saw her as the whale was coming up. It looked like he was trying to breach, and he stopped breaching and turned himself and went the other direction so that he wouldn't hit her. And whales are just amazing. They are also, by the way, very altruistic. There's a story and it's been documented, of a woman who was in the water, and she was doing some scuba diving, and a whale nudged her and kept on pushing her along and got underneath her and pushed her up to the surface and towards this boat, her boat. And she got to the boat and she was so scared. What is this whale doing to me? And she looked around and there was this huge shark in the water and he was saving her from the shark.
Great.
So.
Amazing.
Wow.
Okay, any other questions, comments?
About whale language, how they communicate with each other. What do we know about that now?
We know that the whale, only a very few things about how they communicate with each other. We do know that the whale song that is so famous that you guys all hear is really only sung by the males. The whale song is everybody in that particular area, and we're talking thousands of whales, up to 12,000 whales in the Northern Pacific. They're all singing exactly the same whale song as each other. And that whale song will change slightly over the course of the season so that by the time you get to next year, it will be a very different song. But everybody is singing that same song. The other thing that we know is that the mamas and the babies do actually have a song for each other. They do talk to each other, but it is very, very quiet. So that's all we really know about them.
Okay. If there are no other questions, I guess that's it. Thank you very much,
No, you're very welcome.
Dave and Katie. So
Great job, Dave and Katie.
Yes, very good. Before we sign off, I just wanted to mention next month's speaker is Dick Ellison. Dick Ellison is a epidemiologist from UMass Worcester, and he's going to talk about the pandemic and all that kind of thing. So Will, thanks for coming, and we'll see you next month. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
I can see